Hello, everybody. Wow. I don't know if anybody's still with us. We had a little bit of technical difficulties, but this is first time we've actually used StreamYard, so we'll see how this goes. In any event, hey y'all from Nashville, Tennessee. I'm Kevin McNulty, and this is our first what we call Grow Yourself podcast. It's a personal development podcast. And before I introduce our guest, which I can't wait to do, I'd like to just very briefly tell you about this podcast. Whether you're watching it live or later on, it will be repurposed into a podcast and also be recorded. In any event, so I'm calling this Grow Yourself, and it really started from this idea that I had many years ago. I've been podcasting for a while. However, I really it was really more of a hobby than anything else. And so I've decided to get real serious about it. And it came out of this idea that I had a client many years ago who, he was at the end of his career. He had been with this company for 40 plus years. And I remember I started working with him because he was having a very difficult time at the end of his career. He was very well thought of. He was very smart. And, and the company just couldn't quite understand what was going on with him. And so I met with him a few times, and I realized after a few sessions with him that what was going on is he was at the end of his career, and I think he was a proud man, but I think he was essentially feeling like he still needed to be needed, and that his whole life, which was his career, literally was his life, that when it went away, he wouldn't need to be needed. And so this became difficult for him, and he started hoarding information and not really interacting as well. And so after a few sessions and kind of realizing this, I approached him one session and I said, something, I'll just call him Joe. I said, something, Joe, I think I figured out the problem here. And I kind of expressed to him that I thought with whatever time he still had at this company, he needed to become a cattail. And he just kind of chuckled about that. And he goes, what do you mean? I said, well, you know what a cattail is? He goes, sure. It's in the wetlands and it looks like a cat's tail and this, that, and the other. I said, well, you know what a cattail does when it matures? He says, yes, I do. He said, it explodes. I said, that's correct. And I said, and that's what I think you need to do. You're at the end of your career here. You've had an incredibly distinguished career. And what I think you should do is become the master around here. And your whole life over the next year or two, however long it is in fact to explode, and like the cattail, spread your seeds everywhere, your knowledge, your insight, your wisdom. And I started adopting that mentality. I'm not anywhere near retirement. In fact, I don't even use the term, quite frankly. However, having said that, I've just come to a place where I believe whatever I know, whatever I've learned, whatever insight, wisdom I have, I want to share it. And that's what this podcast is all about. And it's a personal growth podcast, growth, professional growth, life in general, maybe even spiritual growth. And that's what we're going to do here. And so, with this podcast, I want to invite you all, if there's somebody here listening, I want you to invite you to send me ideas or people of things that you want to learn about. The goal here is to get really interesting, accomplished people, at all different junctures. I mean, you don't have to be as accomplished as my guest is today, but, something that they really can share with the rest of the world to help them learn and grow. And that's the mantra here, is to grow yourself from the inside out, learn, grow, change, and succeed from the inside out. So that's what we're going to do. So listen, before we get going here, I want to introduce you to my guest here, but I'll be honest with you. I don't think I have the words to introduce him. When I first learned about him, and I've known him for a few years now, I just referred to him as the beast. I mean, he's just a beast of a man. I don't know how to explain it any differently, but they say that pictures are worth 1,000 words. Well, I wonder what then would be the words that could come from a video. And so instead of me introducing him, I'm just going to share a video with you about him. It's just a few minutes long. And this will pretty much tell you anything that you want to know about Werner Berger. So here we go.
We're back at 7:41. They say age is nothing but a number, but it's one thing to say it. It's quite another to climb the highest mountains in the world.
At 8 minutes after 8 in the morning on May 22nd, Berger achieved a goal even greater than the one he'd set for himself 18 years earlier. A moment as surreal as it was exhilarating.
Again, I mean, you climbed 7 of the highest summits on the 7 continents, including Antarctica.
And standing on the south summit, seeing the traverse, seeing the Hillary Step, and seeing the slope up to the north summit, and the crystal clear blue sky, and knowing that I'm going to stand on top of the world on this particular day. It's just something in somebody's mind. And I think age has everything to do with how old or young you feel. And if I pretended that I felt 70 and did Everest, then it would be something special. I don't feel like a 70-year-old. I don't see myself as here to prove to others that they can do much more than they're presently contemplating. We came up the ice wall yesterday and slept in Camp 1. We've just arrived at Camp 3, just above 23,000 feet. Totally whacked, hard to catch breath. Happy to be here. We're going to the top of Everest. I'm going to the top of Everest. And yes, I know I'll be huffing and puffing, and that's just part of the game. But I know that this body can do this.
He's unbelievably strong. He clearly has the mental capacity, which is a really big part of this. And I think particularly at his age, it's to some extent probably mind over matter. And if anybody's capable of it, it's him.
Am I excited? Of course I'm excited. It's definitely a heck of a lot tougher than I'd ever anticipated or what that people had told me. But we're on our way up. To the summit! This climbing experience is certainly the toughest thing that I've ever done or I've ever exposed my body to. Thank you. Everybody has an Everest to climb. Might not be a mountain, but they have a challenge in their life. And my encouragement is just go for it.
Well, and here I am with Werner Berger. You know, Werner, I was watching your face as you were watching that. And I mean, I just don't even know what to say and think. Welcome to Grow Yourself. Thank you so much for taking your time to be with us here today.
You are totally welcome. If you can accept me in tears. I haven't seen this in, oh gosh, I don't even remember how many years, but boy, does it ever bring back memories.
I just only can imagine. I mean, really, it's not like the memories of going to Disneyland when you're a kid. I mean, this is just beyond belief. So listen, let's just jump right in here. And I just want to ask you now, everybody remember that the podcast is Grow Yourself, and we're talking with the legendary Werner Berger about pushing past impossibilities. And as you listen to this story, think about your own life and what you are able to achieve. But I want to first start, Werner, and just ask, who is Werner Berger? Tell us a little bit about you. Where you were born?
Okay. Before you ask where I was born, for the longest time, I didn't have a clue who Werner Berger was.
Hi.
And in fact, you and I hadn't had a conversation about what brought you to this particular podcast and this influence that you're creating. But you were talking to me at age 43 when I got out of my company and I didn't have a clue who I was. And it wasn't a case of wondering what contributions I'm going to make. The question was, who the heck am I? I'm no longer my university degrees. I'm no longer this guy that's owned and running a company. All I knew is I was burnt out and I did not know what was next. And in fact, even though I came out at a reasonable high, because when you sell off and the funds are there, things feel pretty good. But 4 years later, I was in the pits.
Wow.
And it really was just by happenstance that I found a way out. And two things happened. One is I found a career move that was completely unanticipated, but the other one was my climbing. Because not knowing who I was really had determined my life to that point.
Wow.
In fact, I'll even go a little bit more vulnerable.
That's interesting, yeah.
I didn't only know who I was, I really had the underlying sense of not being good enough. And it didn't matter what I did or how successful I became. It didn't matter. It didn't matter the university degrees. It didn't matter the pole vaulting successes. It didn't matter. It didn't matter that I had 4 of my own kids and we adopted one. Because those were all external things, had nothing to do with me internally. And yet it had everything to do with me internally. So when you talked about what brought you to this point, my ears pricked up.
Wow. That's fascinating. And, one of the things that you're making me think about here is that, we put a lot of people on a pedestal. And we never really know what's going on in their life or in their head. We think that they've just got it all figured out. Mm-hmm. And you're saying it took you a long time to get there. So, that's just amazing. And I appreciate your humility about that, because I think it certainly gives me, but I would even suggest that it gives our listeners perspective as well. That you have this incredibly accomplished, really legendary man here who can say, for the longest time, I didn't know who I was. And, but I suppose that you found yourself perhaps at the top of Mount Everest.
And I'm going to contradict you there.
Okay.
The fact that I was on top of Mount Everest really does not mean very much relative to what I learned about myself, not necessarily on Everest, in the mountains. You cannot be in that kind of an environment, hiking or trekking or climbing, and a lot of times it's hiking, without being completely in the present. And for me, that left marks. I had no idea what I was going to be experiencing other than I went for the adventure. And it could be that I initiated all of this to prove myself. I don't know that for sure, but I strongly suspect that. Never thinking that I was going to find myself, never thinking that I was going to get blown away by what this body can in fact accomplish, just like your body can accomplish, and how magnificent our bodies are, and how amazing they are in terms of adapting to different conditions. All we need to do is allow them and not let our head and our belief systems that are erroneous and built on really powdered bricks dictate our lives.
Very interesting. So when you talk about pushing past the impossible, and I've heard you say this before, that you have to push yourself to see what you're capable of doing. Is that correct?
I believe that there's no growth in the comfort zone. The only place you can grow is outside of it, when you're stretching, when you're risking something. And that's where growth occurs, or it did for me. And living in the present was one of them, being blown away by who this guy is and what this body can do. And accepting that, I'm really not very important. I'm just a little speck in this phenomenal globe and this phenomenal world that we're in. I never felt as connected to everything. How should I say? I never feel as connected to everything when I'm in the mountains or on the trails. And it can't be just a half day or a day. It's got to be day after day after day. And preferably at altitude where, breathing is difficult and you have to start pacing yourself. The fastest people usually don't succeed because they don't know how to pace themselves.
I did notice in your videos, and I've watched several of them, that the pace was, it seemed like a snail's pace, but I got it. When I was watching it, I knew that was intentional. It wasn't as though you were just tired. You understood that you had to take it slowly. But so I don't want to pivot too fast here in this, but I can't help but to ask, if you talk about this for people who won't ever get to Everest, who won't ever get to spend, well, I wouldn't say that, but perhaps would not be able to spend that much time in the present. How do they do that now? How does one do that in their own life?
They need to find the challenge that stops them, but the challenge that they want to break through. Something drives them, and it could be simply doing yoga, but very, very intentionally. And it's not just something I do every morning because it's part of my routine. I need to really allow myself to do it full out so that I can really experience who I am and what my blocks are. And I can't will myself to experience that. It happens when I persist with it. So there's a stretching element to it. Some people can do it through music, where they can tune into themselves to the extent, and I know this is esoteric, where they vibrate. And I don't mean it in that sense.
No, I know where you're going.
Yeah. And when they really start seeing themselves in terms of who they really are, because we are so absolutely phenomenal, and this globe is so absolutely phenomenal. It's the synergy that exists is incredible, and once you see it, you can't go back.
Wow. Part of what I hear you talking about, though, is this concept of flow.
Totally.
Yes?
Totally.
Okay. And flow, how do you define flow, Werner? I want to say Werner because I spent so many years in Europe that I want to use the German pronunciation, but I'll call you Werner.
Flow to me really comes from living in the moment.
Okay.
And being present to what's happening and responding from that, as opposed to responding from how should I respond? And the best example is, you go to a communication course and you're a very telesort person, and you really realize that you have to start listening. But boy, it's so uncomfortable. So most people don't break through. Or you're the person that's more reserved, that knows it's time to be more assertive, to make more statements. But again, they can't do that because it's too uncomfortable. It's too much against their nature. But when you break through that and integrate listening for the fast-paced person into their system where it's an automatic, that's a shift in the right direction. That's outside of their comfort zone. But it's a new comfort zone now. And of course, within that comfort zone, they're far more effective. And the same thing with the person that's more laid back. When they start saying, you know, I disagree with you on that, Kevin. This is how I'm seeing it. And not as a bully, but, and so often that person waits until they get so mad that they'll scream at you, as opposed to have a conversation about what's working or what's not working. So those are breakthrough moments.
Yeah. Yes, very, very good. You know, because I think of flow from, I'm a musician, and I couldn't say that I'm an athlete, but I've done enough athletics that I understand that athletes and musicians will themselves into this flow state. And so, having said that, and especially if they're a group, then they can all create flow together. This is the synergy that you mentioned. I guess you could say they get on the same, you know, in the same zone, the same vibration, whatever you want to call it. But Werner, can you create a relatively sustainable flow in life?
My personal experience is no. It comes and goes. But once I've really experienced me, or I've experienced presence, or I've really experienced humility, and I don't mean being less, but humility relative to the grandeur that we're in.
Yeah.
I can always bring that back.
Yes.
Because I've experienced, I know what it feels like.
I see.
I know that moment.
I see.
And that's what helps me. And it doesn't mean I'm always there.
I see.
It's still a work in progress.
Very, very good. No, I'm so happy you said that, because you're right. Once you've experienced flow, then you go more for it. You go after it more, but you then the more that you experience, and I'm really asking more than telling, the more that you experience, the more you know how to get back to that state of mind, that state of being, if you will. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And that's also what's kept me climbing into this age.
Can I ask how old you are? I know, but I want the audience to know. Come on.
I'm 84 in a few days. Yeah, because it's somewhat,
and you're still talking about climbing.
it's somewhat addictive to be in that space of oneness.
Yes.
And it's not just with the environment or the snow on the mountains or the sky.
Yes.
It's with fellow climbers. You really start looking at these people as magic.
Yeah, I understand. I see what you're saying. I think you can. I experience flow in conversations. We've had a couple of conversations, and I noticed that we would immediately move into this different state, you know, in our conversations. So listen, a couple of people have mentioned in the chat box or in the comments box, and I love it too. My good friend John Bentley and Candace Asher mentioned that they love this idea that you said at the end of the video, that everyone has an Everest to climb.
Yep.
Tell us about that. What is that? I mean, I guess we know what it means a little bit, but in your mind, what does it mean?
Climbing Everest has a struggling component associated with it. In our everyday lives, we have struggling components. We have children that sometimes we're not too kind with. Here's an Everest to climb, because how we raise our children will determine what kind of a society we have. And we all know that, but it's not easy to shift how I'm being as a father or how I've been conditioned to be as a father. And yet, if I really am serious about having this kid grow up as a whole, complete, fully self-reliant and responsible human being, I need to treat this person in a certain way. And that means I need to shift. So that's a part of that. I can't wait for them to shift. This is not about them. It's all about me shifting. It's all about me fixing me, not fixing them.
Wow. And there you have it, you know, learn, grow, change from the inside out. And I use this terminology all the time. When I do workshops, as I know you do leadership workshops and communication workshops as well, that we know that our audiences are always, when we're talking about these things, whether it's, whether it's communication or child rearing or whatever the case might be, that they kind of always want conflict. They always want to talk about the other person.
Mm-hmm.
And I assume for you as well, refer them back to this notion about what about you? You see, where, what work do you have to do to make this better? If you're in a team,
yeah.
You can talk about the other team members, and certainly it's important to the synergy, but focusing on you, that's the place that you can really control.
Mm-hmm.
You can't control so much going on out there.
Mm-hmm. In my corporate consulting, we used a model around personal responsibility. And the model was very simply, if I want this relationship with you to work, how much responsibility do I have to take for it? And you will answer me, which most people or many don't, 100%. And if the truth is, if I have 100% responsibility, from my perspective, how much can I put on you? And the only answer is 0. Because the minute I say, oh, you take 10% responsibility, when anything doesn't work, it's your fault.
Oh, interesting.
You didn't meet your 10%. And that's, of course, the erroneous part, because the moment I do that, I have no personal responsibility in this. And if I have no personal responsibility, I become a victim to circumstances that don't exist, but that I now proclaim exist. And it's
very interesting.
10%.
Very, very interesting what you're saying. Okay, so now Werner, we jumped ahead of everything, but I knew we would. I want to go back and ask you about who is Werner Berger. Where did you come from? Where were you born? And tell us just a little bit of your life's trajectory to this point.
Was born and raised in the Republic of South Africa.
Interesting.
Born in Johannesburg. My dad was interned during the war because he was a recent German immigrant. I was 2.5 years old when he was interned. 6 years later, he came back, total stranger, and I never got to link with him. It's only in my later life that I see what a remarkable guy he was. He wasn't the kind of father I would have hoped for. Then I came to Canada as a geologist, worked a couple of years, got married, realized that geology and married life don't work very well together. Went back to university, did an MBA. In the meantime, I also did a master's in science, had kids, took over the running of a company, got divorced 30 years later. Unfortunately, we're still good friends. And found my present wife, Heshi, had no intent of ever getting married again, and got swept off my feet. What can I say?
And I've spoken to her a time or two, and she is absolutely a delight. But so I can't help to ask, though, about the whole concept of you climbing. Was it summiting Everest and getting married? I don't recall exactly the chronology there.
Well, there was a little bit of a twist, actually, in the conversation with Matt Lauer. It wasn't exactly that way.
Okay.
The way it was is she said, you better come back if you want to marry me.
I see.
And it was much more about potentially not coming back, because at my age, 1 in 4 die on Everest, because I was 69 when I climbed it. But I had no concerns because I was physically in good shape. But yeah, but actually there's an interesting little story here that I'm just going to throw in. When I arrived at the airport in Los Angeles, my camera crew actually came to meet me because I was going to be doing a movie called Back from the Edge, and the whole purpose was to change North American health. And I thought,
wow,
what better model than a 69-year-old climbing Mount Everest? And so I met these guys, and my oldest son actually flew down from Canada to meet me. And then suddenly, from behind this crowd, Heshi pops out. And she lives on the East Coast, so that was totally unexpected. And that was fairly early in our dating life. So it was a thrill.
That is a thrill. That is really amazing. So what compelled you really then to take on these 7 highest peaks on 7 continents? I mean, where did that start? Because if I understand correctly, you weren't sort of this mountaineering type person. I mean, you didn't really have a background in it.
It actually started in a workshop. And the guy in front of the room in 1989 said, think of 3 things you want to do before you die, but you don't think you ever would. The movie The Bucket List hadn't come out yet, so we didn't have that terminology. And what came up for me is I want to climb Kilimanjaro because I was born in Africa. I want to climb the Matterhorn because everybody knows this beautiful mountain in Switzerland. And I would love to see Everest Base Camp. Never dreaming that any bit would happen.
Just base camp.
Just base camp, yeah.
Right.
One of my adventurous sons, 3 years later, said, hey, you wanted to go to Everest Base Camp. Why don't we do it? So we did it and had a phenomenal time. Not only relative to what I experienced in the climb and about me, but the relationship with my son, Paul, just went like this. It had been really good at a younger age. Then there was some drama because I didn't really know how to parent. I treated him at 15 the way I treated him at 9. And of course, that comes across as control, which was not my intent. My intent was to solve his problems for him so he didn't have to fall into traps.
I see.
And of course, from his perspective, that was me controlling. So that happened. So a few months after coming back, I realized that something had shifted in me. And that's what drew me back into wanting more. And never had the idea of doing the 7 summits. Never had the idea that I'd be in the Guinness Book of Records. All of that just happened. One thing led to another, led to another, and led to another. Even in 2007, when I climbed Everest, I still did not believe that I would be on Everest. But it was the final one.
Now, when you went to travel to Everest, when you actually went there, was your only intent to go to the base camp and you just continued?
No.
Okay.
My first,
I guess you couldn't do that. Could
Yeah.
you really have to be ready?
Yeah, my first climb with him was in 1992. And it wasn't until 2007 that I actually climbed Everest.
I see. Okay. Oh, wow.
Yeah. Because there were the other summits before then too.
Yeah.
Lesser summits.
Right.
But that was also my way of learning
Yeah.
how to be on ice and snow.
I see. So I want to ask you, Werner, for our viewers and our listeners. And by the way, my friend Candace Asher, she said to tell you, you have made my day.
Thank you, Candace.
So I think most of us probably, maybe not, could imagine perhaps the physical training that you have to go to climb such mountains. I would imagine Everest. Is Everest the hardest, Werner? Is it the hardest mountain to climb? Oh,
no.
I guess I assumed it.
There were 2 harder ones for me. One of them was McKinley, which is now called Denali.
Yes.
And it took me 3 attempts to get to the top because each time weather prevented us. Once within 200 vertical from the summit, 200 vertical feet from the summit. And it was only a 20-minute walk, gentle walk on the summit ridge. We couldn't do it because of weather. And on Denali, you carry your own 55-pound backpack.
Whoa.
And you're dragging a sled behind you because no porters are allowed. On Everest, we had porters. The other one that was very difficult was Carson's Pyramid, which is actually called the 8th of the 7 because the mountain in Australia is very small. It's only 7,200 feet. So it doesn't really count in the climber's lexicon. So it gets replaced by Carson's. But Carson's has a 6-day trek into it through very, very steep rain every single day, heavy jungle, roots that are moss covered, and you misstep and you go through I went head over heels 3 times on that trip.
You're kidding me. This is in Chile?
No, it's
Oh.
Papua New Guinea.
Oh, Papua New Guinea. Okay.
It replaces Kosciuszko in Australia because it's still part of the Australo-Asian shelf.
I see. Okay, so having heard, it's amazing for you to say things like, 7,000 feet. I mean, it's not really that big of a deal. Most of us were thinking, okay, that's so. Talk to us about mindset, though. Maybe mindset in preparation. And again, I always, for the audience, want to link it to how it can help all of us in our daily lives or in our struggles or whatever the case might be. But in any event, the mindset to prepare, but I guess even the mindset to be there. I mean, you must have come across times that you just were done. You're just ready to quit. Yes?
Oh, yes. On any high mountain, you usually climb the mountain more than once. In fact, for a lot of Everest, you climb it 3 times. The first time through the ice fall, and this is a fairly treacherous section, and you're moving from 17,500 feet to 19,500, and you want to do it reasonably fast because the glacier shifts and the crevasses, and because of the shifting, you have tumbling ice. When I got to Camp 1 after base camp, I thought I was done. This mountain is too much for me. However, a few deep breaths later, a night's sleep later, on we went. And the next 2 times through the same stretch were no problem. But each person has usually one bad day on the mountain, and you don't know when it's going to be. By the way, Everest took us a total of 56 days to get to the top and back to civilization. And from the top back to civilization was 6 days. So 50 days to get to the top. But it's all about acclimatization. And now, mindset. For me, the most critical thing, if I correlate it with a climb, is the desire to do this. And if the desire is strong enough, nothing can stop you. I remember being with a group till I think it was about 10:30 at night. I'd done some training during the day. And by the time I got back to my hotel room, it was midnight. But I now did my training, my weight training and my cardio training, because I knew the mountain didn't care if I was fit or not, but I would care. So, it was, people would say, "Oh, you're so committed." And I said, "No, I'm not that committed. It's just I have no choice at this point because I'm now driven by this compelling vision." So that's one part.
The vision. I love that.
The other part has to do with just simply experiencing self to the point where I can't always say, "Oh, I'm not as good as I should be. I should have done better here. I should have done better there." And the other part comes from knowing something, and this is cognitive, about our internal conversations. And I was 43 before I even learned that I was talking to myself.
Wow.
And the question to me was, do you, when you, and I can't remember exactly how it was. Maybe I'm going to use the word experiencing something. Is it because you're talking to yourself, or do you visualize something? And I did not know. The only reason I got to know is because when I listened to myself, was I talking to myself in German, or was I talking to myself in English? And that made me realize I'm talking to myself. And I'm saying I should have learned this at age 4 and 5 and 6 and 10, not at 43. But I didn't know. Was it because I was dumb and stupid? No, because I'm not dumb and stupid. It's just I didn't know. And once you start knowing that, and then have a handle on what can I do to change mindsets, I don't have to climb to do that. I can do it by simply saying, okay, what am I saying to myself now? Challenging myself and saying, is this rational? Am I really this weak? Am I really this nobody? What are my accomplishments? What is my proof that I'm not this weakling? And living into that. That is a way of changing a mindset. But that takes work. That's going through that inner journey that I believe every effective leader has to go through. And it doesn't matter whether you're talking about a parent as a leader or a corporate leader or a societal leader. It doesn't matter.
Or as my buddy John Benning likes to say, to lead yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, it starts here.
Yeah.
I can lead here.
Yeah.
Then I'm not in control.
So if you want to if you want to make this mind shift, first of all, what would you then suggest that, I hope this question comes out right. What would you suggest that a person aspires toward? So we know what we want to get rid of, the bad self-talk. What is sort of a target you're going after with respect to your mindset?
I don't think there is one.
Okay.
And the reason I'm saying that is each one of us was born with some very unique talents. And in our formative years, we learned some things about ourselves. Some are positive, some are not positive. But there's always something that draws us. And it could be music, it could be art, it could be track and field. But there's also a pitfall with track and field, with any athletics. And we can go into that if you wish. There's a real pitfall there, or there was one for me. So the question is, what, and it really comes back to this one, and you've heard it many times. If you had all the money in the world, what would you be doing? And most people would say, oh, I'd take a holiday, I'd build a house, I'd buy a car, blah, 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 blah. And what would you doing afterwards? Yeah. And it's not a case of there isn't something that I would love to accomplish. There's something that I am uniquely qualified to do, but that's what has to be found. And when I find that, then I've got a mission. Then I've got a purpose in life. Then I can find enjoyment in getting up.
That's powerful. Werner, as you well know, I see young people, young professionals all the time. And one of the things that comes out of their mouth so often is the concept of, I'm just not sure where my life is going. I'm not sure where my career is going. I've got a job here. I like it okay. I make some decent money, but I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. That sort of mentality. Mm-hmm. You have any thoughts about that? I mean, that's a tough one, but what are your thoughts about that?
That's where the introspection comes from. And it's in the silence that we learn. And I didn't even think of this, but on the mountain, it's a very solitary game, actually. I can
imagine.
And it's in that silence that we learn and discover things. And it's not necessarily having an intent to discover a certain thing. Just be open to whatever we're going to discover. And not even wait until we've discovered something, because it doesn't come on a time schedule. It'll come when it comes. But it really is, I need to become introspective, be really clear on, what's keeping me in this present stuckness.
Yeah.
Because from the stuckness, I can't see. And the golden handcuffs are just a great example of real stuckness, because of my fear that the minute I drop them, there'll be nothing. But of course, now there's everything.
It's very interesting. When you say golden handcuffs, I've experienced that, and some who are on with us now many have experienced that. But military people experience this all the time. I don't know if you call it golden handcuffs, probably silver handcuffs, but the point is that you spend a certain amount of time in the military, and although it's not a place to go make money, the security's there. And even at 20 years, which I spent 20 years in the Air Force, I remember coming up on that thinking, boy, what will I do? I mean, this is my life, my culture, and and I'm a little bit stuck from the standpoint that I don't want to move outside of this fairly comfortable position that I'm in. I was at the top of my game. I became really good at what I was doing. People respected me. But I did, in my head, I was certain that there was something, bigger out there for me, something that, because I did enjoy my career, but I didn't feel like it was my life's work by any stretch of the imagination. And so, I have a program that I call Do It Afraid, and I just said to myself, I'm really afraid to do this, to leave this comfort thing. I was going to, like you, become a consultant and a coach and a speaker and this, that, and the other, and really had no means of supporting myself. But I said, I don't care. I did care, but I'm just going to do it. I'm just taking that step. Yes?
Absolutely. In fact, I take my hat off to you because, and I have some thoughts about the military. There's a time in the military where you find yourself because of the rigor that you go through, and you have to connect with yourself going through that rigor. But at the same time, you have the opportunity of losing yourself into an establishment that, as you said, is safe. Literally everything is provided for as long as I follow the rules.
Correct.
It's going to be very successful and comfortable. And then to break out of that into what I would call total freedom has to be a shock to the system, especially when you add PSD to it.
Yeah. PTSD. Yes. No, you're exactly right about that. As a matter of fact, and I'm not trying to promote it here, but I wrote a book exactly about that. The gap between two worlds. It was all about this, leaving this one world and trying to go to another world that you have no concept about whatsoever. And so you jump into the middle, into the gap, as we call it. And then there is this foggy zone. And the foggy zone is primarily made up of psychological barriers, if you will, limiting beliefs. You can't see the new world because of your anxiety, your disorientation, your discomfort, all of these things. And even in the book, I write that so many people, they flee the gap and go back to where, something similar to what they were doing that they really didn't like so much, quite frankly.
Yeah.
But the discomfort was so bad inside the gap that they did not see themselves through that foggy zone to get to the new world, whatever that is.
It ties so closely with deviant behavior.
Interesting.
I'm determined not to do something.
Yeah.
And yet I keep going back to doing it.
I see.
Because there's comfort there, or maybe it dulls the pain of not knowing. So interesting.
Very, very interesting. So, Werner, just maybe as a final topic, I did want to ask you about motivation, and I think it's a little bit timely right now because of the COVID environment that we were in. Yes, Candace is talking about, I know women who went back to their abusers, they divorced because of the gap. It's the same concept. Yes. The same concept. Yeah. And sometimes we can't understand it. We're like, are you crazy to go back to the person that was just beating your butt? But, but the discomfort inside of the gap and not knowing where you're going is, in some ways, I guess you could say it's a lot of motivation to go back to what at least was comfortable. I'm not comfortable, but normal. You're whatever that normal is.
And a big part of that, of course, is if I'm in that situation, I do lose myself. Yeah. Otherwise, I wouldn't have stayed as long as and once I've lost myself, the question becomes, how do I regain me? How do I reconnect with this human being and start honoring this human being and accepting that really we are all special and I am special. And I don't mean it and person only, we're all special.
Yeah.
Until we know it and can feel it. It's not up here. We have to feel it.
You have to know it.
Yeah,
You
deep down.
you almost can't even explain it. You've said that three or four times in throughout this video cast about losing yourself. And it just really, this last time that you mentioned it rang true, that you can get into bad situations and I think about I'll shift it slightly here to organizational culture. That oftentimes a company loses themselves
Totally
inside the culture. Why? Because they just do what they've always done, and they're not thinking about it. They're just doing it. And therefore, suddenly after years and years and years of doing the same thing over and over, whether it was working or not, they eventually go, now what was our vision? What were we trying to achieve here? Why are we doing any of this? Right? Is that the same thing as losing yourself personally, that you just get so immersed into a relationship or a situation or a job that your mind almost goes numb?
I would say absolutely. And we've got an example of a sports team, a football team, that's really been in the news of late. That has been very inappropriate in how it dealt with its female staff.
I see.
And, why wouldn't they think that sooner or later that's going to come to light and going to bite them? But you get lost in it. And you get lost in the military. You get lost in an abusive relationship. You get lost within your own company. And all you have to rely on is the job. And you, especially if you're the leader, it's lonely at the top.
Yeah.
At the same time, at least I've got a place on this earth.
And this is why people, let's say if you took a bad relationship, they get out of the relationship and 6 months later, they say to themselves, what was I thinking? Right? Because they realize they were lost inside of that relationship, and everybody around them was saying, get out of it, destroy the relationship, and they wouldn't do it. And then 6 months later, when they finally leave, they just can't even understand how they allowed themselves to be a part of it.
Yep. You're right on track.
So real quick about motivation, talk to us a little bit about, how, I ask this question all the time, or kind of make a statement in the form of a question, or a question in the form of a statement about motivation and discipline. So let me just say discipline first. People say, well, you have to be disciplined about something, to do something. And I say, well, but doesn't it take discipline to be disciplined? And I'm begging the question, how does one, let's just say, generally speaking, develop some kind of a discipline and fire inside that allows them to find themselves, or to find their Everest, or to go after whatever is their purpose in life? I know it's a broad question, but I'd love to hear your thoughts about that.
I personally think there's a significant difference between motivation and inspiration.
Okay.
And for example, as a leader,
fair enough.
I can't motivate you. However, I can inspire you to motivate yourself. And a good leader will do that so that you can step outside of your comfort zone. Not me pushing you out, but you being inspired to step out. And if I think of myself, I was truly inspired to do something with my climbing. Was it to prove myself? Who knows? Was it because I love the outdoors? Who knows? Who was it? Or maybe it was, once I got the taste of it, that I wanted to be in that environment more and more and more. And that's the inspiration that had me go and start training at midnight when I needed to be back in with my team or my classroom the next day at 8 o'clock, because the group started at 9. But it didn't matter. And I was motivated to do it because I was inspired.
Yeah.
So I think that's the bottom line. And until we can find out what inspires us, what is that unique gift that we bring to the world, it becomes hard to actually bring forth.
I see. And so we as human beings, again, whether we're young professionals or people who are retiring, by the way, there's of course the baby boomers are retiring in droves.
Yeah.
And my wife happens to work with a lot of retiring people in music. She teaches music and works with adults. And, and hears about this all the time, about people retiring and having no clue, and they're young, if you will, and no real idea about what to do with their life. And it becomes very, very difficult. And boy, if there's somewhere that I think you could probably get lost, is in retirement.
Well, that was me. Remember the 4 years that I went way down and had no idea where I was, no idea where I was going.
Very interesting.
I didn't even think in terms of what contribution am I making to the world. That was.
So what was the pivot then? What was the tipping point? Was it just in that class that you just went boom, or?
There were a number of things that happened. It so happened that I got in touch with somebody that was with a consulting group, and I'd always known, I'm a good teacher, which of course means I'm also a good coach, but I'd never really owned that.
I see.
And so when I started looking at that, I thought, this sounds kind of good. The only problem, of course, with all of that was it was all cognitive. And even though we had some of the best products that exist on the market in terms of sales training, in terms of leadership development, people would walk away from the class saying, my gosh, this is going to be life-changing. 6 months later, they didn't remember the name of the program because there was no reinforcing mechanism to put them to break through and to start utilizing the skills that they are uncomfortable at utilizing because that's not their habit pattern. So that, and then being on the mountains and really being so enamored, partly because of my son saying, let's go, and us going. And then eventually me coming to realize that until you've gone through your own inner journey, none of the training really, I was going to say, makes sense. No, it makes a lot of sense, but it's not implementable for most people without some structure to really support the breakthrough. Because just again, a bit of a statistic, the average person, it takes 18 repetitions for something to start embedding in them. And I'm talking about communication skills as the easiest, become a listener as opposed to be always a teller, or to do it the other way around. And that 18 cannot be over a 6-month period. It has to be over a 2-3 week period at the most.
I see. Very interesting.
Until it's ingrained.
Yeah. And this is why and I know, and speaking to other colleagues, like coaching so much, because it is exactly what you're saying. It offers that repetition, that ability to actually transfer a skill into the workplace or something. So I have one more question for you. And then after that, I just want to ask, how can people reach out to you? How can they find you, or whatever the case might be? But here's the last question. So what the heck are you doing these days? I mean, what's next? You gonna, maybe you're gonna do Mars, or, what is next for 84-year-old? And many people, by the way, said happy birthday to you.
Oh, thank you.
84-year-old Werner Berger. I can't wait to hear this.
Well, last year's trip to Everest Base Camp with a group, or to the top of Kilimanjaro, got deferred. This year's got deferred, so I'm hoping that at least I'll have one more climb. And the reason I'm saying one more, because I'm starting to have knee problems. So, I need to realize my climbing days are over. But it doesn't mean that I'm not going to look at how can I translate this into other people doing the actual trip and me just simply masterminding, because I truly believe that leadership is a transformational process, and everybody can learn it, but cannot be taught it. So all we have to do is create that environment. So that's one thing. And to that effect, I found a fabulous company that's allowing me and it's not allowing, this is what they offer, for me to build an authority group within their structure. But the nice part is it's spam free and it's troll free and it's by invitation only. So within the next week, I'm going to run my first, what we call show, or it could be, and there will be some interviews associated with it. And I'll just be inviting people to the show. And as my authority builds in the domain of leadership, because I left the corporate side well behind, almost 20 years now. And then, really launch into this leadership academy. That's one of them.
That sounds fabulous. And so how then, if folks want to connect with you or maybe get invited to your show, how can they do that, Werner?
Werner, and that's WER, not AR, at Quest, not West, Quest736.com.
Okay, and I will make sure that I put it here. Well, if it's okay, I'll put it in the notes here below.
Yeah, please do. And of course, I'm happy to have conversations like this with anybody at any point in time because it fuels me. It says yes.
Well, listen, I mean, that's the perfect segue to say that, I've had 3 or 4 of them with you, and each time it's delightful, it's invigorating, it's inspiring. And I've told at least 10 people this: if I could just be like half of what you are, even how you look, I was like, if I can look half that good at 84, I would be so happy. You're obviously taking very good care of yourself, as Heshy is, I'm sure, as well. She's doing some wonderful things out there as well, as I understand it.
Well, we do work at it because if our bodies are not strong,
yeah.
Health there's nothing more important than our health.
Yeah, I get
if
that.
you want to live a happy, long life.
Yes. And vibrant as you are, at 84. I mean, it's not, it's amazing, to hear somebody at your age, I mean, if you don't mind me saying, as vibrant as you are. It's just so wonderful. It's honestly, it's inspiring to me. And I would submit to you, people that are watching this and who may watch it or listen to it as a podcast will feel the same. So, well, Werner Berger, my goodness, thank you so very much. God bless you. I'm so proud to call you a friend and look forward to staying in touch with you. And is there any maybe final comment or anything else you would like to say before we sign off here?
Well, the first one is thank you so much for the opportunity to have this chat with you. And the other one is everybody has the right to truly find themselves and to live out loud. Loud.
I love that. I will tell you very, very, very quickly before we go here that, and I was kind of dying to tell you, I haven't told you a story yet. It's a very short one, but I love the Alps. Like anybody who's ever traveled to the Alps, I'm just fascinated by them. I've been to most of them, well, at least the European Alps, and are they called? They're not called Alps other places. So I guess that's the only places the Alps would exist. But in any event, I took my brother-in-law several years ago. He had never been outside of the country, hadn't really traveled that much within the country. And he knew that I lived in Germany for many years. But both as a child, I grew up part of my life in the Bavarian Alps, and then as an adult in the Air Force. And so I really knew particularly Germany, like the back of my hand. And he would say every year when we would gather at my wife and his parents' home for Christmas, we'd have a couple of Manhattans. And every year I would hear this voice shout from, after he's had a couple of Manhattans, shout from across the room, "Hey, Kevin, when are you going to take me to Europe? I want to travel. I want to go with you." I was like, "Yeah, Mark, we'll do it." We every year it was this thing. And then one year he did that. And I actually had just gotten out of the Air Force a few years, had been out, I think 2003. And I said, "By the way, actually, I am going to Europe this year. I have some business there, so you better get your passport if you want to do this." And so it wasn't concrete at that point. But then somewhere around April, I called him. I said, "You got your passport? The gig went through. I'm going to Frankfurt in August. And if you want to join me, we'll trek around Europe." And so he got his passport. So to make a long story short, we traveled from Frankfurt. We ended up going down the, I guess it would be the western side of Germany into Switzerland. And we were going to go to Jungfrau, which is near the Matterhorn, of course, but we ended up going to a place called Gimmelwald. And Gimmelwald it's an incredible place. It's not very touristy. But anyways, we had gotten lost and we ended up going up to Gimmelwald to the last town that you could travel by car. And then we got on a cable and rode well, it was like 11:30 at night. So he had no idea where he was. I mean, we were very high up. I don't remember but in any event, he had no clue. I had, again, been to the Alps many times, was raised a little bit in the Alps. I knew exactly what it was going to look like in the morning. He had no concept in his head. So I positioned him at this old hotel. Exactly. You know where I'm going with this. So we stayed at this old hotel. It was something like built in 1901 called the, I can't think of it right now, but Mittighorn. And so I positioned him in the bed next to the window. You know, in Germany, in these old places, they have these giant windows. I mean, they're huge. And so my plan was to, because I was thinking about this, my plan was to wake up early and wait for him to wake up. And as soon as he gets up, the window's right in his face. You can't miss it. And so I got up about an hour early. Actually, I didn't sleep much, but in any event, I wouldn't, and they only had a community bathroom down the hall. I wouldn't even go to the bathroom because I had to see his face when he woke up. So finally, I sat there for an hour. He finally gets up. He leans over. He has these really thick glasses. He couldn't see anything. He leans over and grabs his glasses and puts them on. And when he looks out there, he goes like, I am not exaggerating, went, and he held his breath so long. I said, Mark, are you okay? He just said, oh, unbelievable. And it reminds me of what you're saying about everyone has the Everest. And I use this idea to ask people to go find their Gimmelwald. In other words, that thing that takes your breath away. There's not enough people pursuing those sorts of things. So anyways, Werner, thank you again so much. It's been such a pleasure. God bless you. And I'll look forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you so much, Kevin.
Okay.
What a pleasure.
My pleasure. You take care. We'll talk to you again. All right. Bye-bye.